Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing details. Today we're discussing a lovely limited edition of 120 pieces in rose gold launched for the 2020 model year to celebrate 60 years of the Grand Seiko brand. This is the Grand Seiko SBGW264, so a vintage-inspired timepiece, elegant and manually wound, 39 millimeters in diameter, 12.2 millimeters thick, super compact at 43.8 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, with a 19 millimeter spacing in between the lugs. Now, when I throw this on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see it wears well. In fact, I could recommend this as a unisex option because it is so short across the wrist and low enough to fit underneath any kind of a dress cuff. So the watch would probably be appropriate for a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. My wrist, once more for reference, is 16 centimeters in circumference. The strap is high grade, as you can see, large rectangular scale and fairly symmetrical scale alligator leather. That's an expensive cut of the animal when you combine all of those qualities of the scale pattern. You can see it is a glossy execution with folded edges and a monotone stitch. On the bottom, calfskin, you can see no crimping, no gouging, a brand new Japanese-made OEM strap by Grand Seiko. What I always find remarkable about these Grand Seiko straps is how soft they are. The only unbroken in leather I've ever experienced that is this soft, you're talking the seats of a Ferrari. It's a remarkable thing. Because this is a dress watch, a pin buckle is appropriate. We have both polish and satin on this buckle with the Grand Seiko branding. The case is simple with blended integrated lugs. You can see that there's a little bit of an inside or interior beveling to the lug profiles. The case is satin finished all the way through end to end with the lug hoods and the case top being polished. We have a little bit of a countersink to the crown so it doesn't stick out too much. You can see the Grand Seiko logo on the crown. And then we have a little vertical satin finished lip to the bezel and then a broader conical polished profile with a real bubble-like sapphire designed to evoke a vintage plexiglass. The watch does feature hacking or stop seconds. Pull out the crown, stop the seconds. That can easily be accomplished. 30 meters water resistant. The dial is a lovely and verdant green, and apparently the pattern was one of Grand Seiko's first attempts to interpret birch bark on a dial. Now, we know eventually that would go in a completely different direction. Keep in mind, there are two Grand Seiko production centers, one in Morioka that produced this, that is the Shizuku Ishii studio, that makes the mechanical pieces, and then Shinshu is where the spring drive and the quartz watches are made. So they both reference birch, but in very different ways. And so you can see this pattern of little opposed streaks and rectangles. And then what really sets this dial apart from its peers in the luxury space is just how handmade it is. Grand Seiko and Rolex have the best dial quality in mainstream luxury, but Rolex gets there with a lot of automation, whereas Grand Seiko does it with a lot more hand craftsmanship. So all of these pieces are faceted, polished, and brushed on tiny milling tools manipulated by people who only make these parts all day long. Look at the break between the polished edges of the hands and the satin top, or the faceting of these indices. Look how they have little grooves down their center, but mirrored facets outboard. Once these pieces are made, they are then placed and caulked by hand to produce the quality you see here. Now, turning it all over, there's a little bit of detail on the back. You can see the 60th anniversary dedication, water resistant 30 meters. Here's the note that this is a individual edition for 2020. It's made in Japan, and this is number 13 of 120. The caliber is nicely decorated. Mostly mechanical in execution here, but quite attractive, particularly the ratchet wheel with its mirrored concave. So manual wind, 72-hour power reserve, 4 Hz beat rate, hacking seconds, 6 position adjustment, not the typical 5 you'd find on a chronometer or high horology. If you look very closely, you can see the Grand Seiko lion and logo ghosted onto the underside of this case back. 24 pivot jewels, and in static testing, it runs +5, -3, which is actually better than the chronometer static test of +6, -4. And on the wrist, it can be expected to run somewhere between -1 and +10 per day. And you can see that this is a very manufactured movement with even features like the regulator, the hairspring, the shock protection, and the lubricants themselves made in-house by the company, making this one of the most integrated manufacturers in the world, proudly made in Japan. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.